social worker that has the 48 laws of power and art of war is a dangerous mind. Today is going to be all about how to attack your opponent's mental game.
Everyone at this level is pretty much the same. Everything is like, it's mental.
And you mentioned that sometimes your opponent has other stuff going on in life. Oh, it sounds like life is a lot for them. Maybe self-control / self-regulation, something I want to attack in this case. Gather information about your opponent.
Screw up the rhythm and the pace and the momentum so that they overthink their second serve. Most of the time, it's a double fault.
The last one for focus comes from a book called The Inner Game of Tennis. Imagery is also going to be a really good one.
I disagree with that completely because I feel like mentally...
Touche. I have to cross this part out.
No, you're good.
No, I have to cross it out. How self-control and self-regulation works when it comes to humans is very interesting. I'm going to use an analogy of a battery.
And I would stand like right in front of the box and I would screw with them. And they're like, nah, screw this guy. And they serve. A bomb second serve hits like the back fence. The second your initial demeanor changes, that's when like your opponent knows to crack you.
Welcome to the All Mental Podcast for athletes, where we do a deep dive into the mental strategies so that you can be able to gain a competitive edge in any sport that you play. And not just on the defensive side of things with confidence and handling failure and being focused, but also on the offensive side of things. How you can be able to attack your opponent's mental game so you can gain an even greater overall performance. I'm your host, Charles, and while I am a licensed therapist, it's only for informational and educational purposes only. This is not a substitute for your own individual therapy. If you do need a therapist, please do find one inside your area. Division I tennis athlete from Fairleigh Dickinson, Nate Roberman. Welcome back to the All Mental Podcast for athletes. Today is going to be all about how to attack your opponent's mental game. I'm very excited for this episode. Actually, I have books in front of me this time. I got the 48 Laws of Power, Art of War, and some notes from some different scientific research articles. It's going to be a great episode, man. How are you doing tonight?
I'm good. How are you? Happy to be back here. I mean, second time already. I loved the first one. Everyone else loved the first one. I think it's amazing that I can, do this and, just be a part of the process.
We're going to dive on right into things. So how I'm going to structure this podcast so people really understand the mental game and for the different strategies that you want to be able to attack is it's going to be a three-step process. For anything you want to attack in a mental game, it's a three-step process. The first thing is you have to know what you want to attack, whether it's their confidence or whether it's their focus or whether it's their anger or whether it's their self-control. In this case, we're going to be talking about focus and self-control. There's other different things. We can do that on a different podcast, but these are two really crucial and important ones and critical ones that any athlete can be able to attack. So first step is just knowing the name. The second step is knowing how self-control is built, how focus is built. What is the fundamental aspects of whatever you're trying to attack? You have to know the fundamental aspects to know if it's working or not and really be able to understand how your opponent kind of functions in a way. And the third step is just how you want to be able to attack it. There's like 5 different things to be able to attack someone's focus. For self-control, there's like 2 or 3 different things. And then depending on someone's sport, how they attack it is going to be completely different. That's a 3-step process. What do you want to attack? Knowing the foundation of it, and then how do you want to be able to attack in that way? So that's how we're going to be able to structure these things. And then on the back end of the podcast, which is the most important part of the podcast, is the fundamental rules and principles and laws of attacking someone's mental game, which is based off of these 2 books. 48 Laws of Power, which is mostly a book people utilize for manipulating the crap out of people when it comes to workforce and whatnot, and so on and so forth. And also The Art of War, which is a really classic type of book, which actually isn't really much of a book. It's more of like phrases per se. But these 2 books lay a really strong foundation for how you want to be able to attack someone's mental game. I know a social worker that has the 48 Laws of Power and Art of War is a dangerous mind. It is what it is. That's what makes it so fun. So let's dive on right into things, starting with focus. So I'm going to talk about how. And I don't think the research is on this anywhere. So this is just me taking and pulling everything together. I want to talk about strategies I see based on the research and based on the fundamental aspects of the books in front of me. You let me know what you think. And as a listener, if you're listening in, think about your own sport. Think about which ones might be more effective for your sport and which strategies might be more effective. And so this is a new territory. This is going to be a really, really, really good one. I want to do confidence too, because everyone talks about confidence, about the defensive aspect of things, but attacking someone's confidence is fun. I'll do that later podcast. So with focus, that's just step 1. You want to attack someone's focus. The fundamental aspect of focus has to do with them being inside the present moment. If you're inside the present moment, that's when you're the most focused. If you have someone thinking about the past or someone thinking about the future, their mind is then split up in different ways. It might be 15% on the past, 15% on the future, and there's only 70% on the present moment, which means if your mind is processing things slower, it has to tell your body what to do through your neurons, etc. And therefore, your body then moves slower. If your body moves slower, now you're a millisecond behind. And you, as a tennis player, if they're a millisecond behind, they hit the ball late, they hit the ball in the frame, they miss hit the shot, or they miss the shot altogether. And then that equals points for you. So it's everything. Most sports are a game of inches. Soccer, swimming, footballs, it's all a game of inches. So the goal would be to attack someone's focus is to get them to think about anything but the present moment. And most of the time when you're attacking someone's mental state, it's not like you're just going to absolutely destroy their mental state. Probably not going to happen, especially at a D1 level. Like, everyone's mental state should be pretty good. I mean, yeah, should be pretty good. So you're not going to just demolish someone's mental state. It's going to be like a 1 or 2 or 3% hit on their mental state. But again, all you need is just milliseconds of an interruption or just a half an inch of an interruption. So when it comes to actual strategies on focus, now that you understand that it's about the present moment, here's my ideas and let me know what you think, Nate. The first thing the first way to be able to attack someone's focus is to make them perform faster, speed up the pace. If you speed up the pace, this is really effective if someone is taking a while to be able to gather their thoughts. In the tennis world, you can see, obviously, you can't do this if you're returning a serve, but if you're serving, and you see like they take a long time to be able to get prepared. We talked about your pre-performance routine, things that you do. You know, you say some words to yourself, you take a deep breath, and then you tell yourself like three balls in. If that takes you a while to do, and you see your opponents, their pre-performance routine takes a while, speed up the process. If you speed it up, they're not ready. They're not ready to be able to go. And that's really effective for focus on that end. You can also be able to slow things down. If you see that they are really focused, they are locked in, they are ready to go, slow it down. Slowing it down just gives it more time for other things to be able to phase in. It gives them more time to be able to have something be able to distract their focus. In other sports, like in football, you go no huddle to be able to speed up the pace. Or you take a while to be able to see what the defense is doing, and then you can be able to change the play, call an audible, or call an alert, or whatever you want to be able to do. Basketball, you can push the ball down the court, or you can take your time going down the court. Every sport has this type of strategy in it. Use the same thing on the mental game. Besides speeding things up or slowing things down, other aspects to be able to attack focus is, especially if someone's in flow, especially if someone is in flow state, which is where you want to be. If they're in the flow state, then you got a problem. So what you can be able to do, flow state is all about being in the present. And once you get out of the present moment, it breaks flow state. So if you can mention something, anything, yo, that last shot you hit was absolutely nasty. How are you able to paint that line? Anything about the past, anything about the present, just to kind of get them out of it.
Yep.
Anything. And so at that point, if they're in flow state, you're in trouble. So you're trying to just anything at all. What we could also do if they're really locked into the present is mention something else in the present. Like, man, the clouds today is like making a nice cloud cover, or the sun is blazing outside. Anything to get them off the present moment.
Mm-hmm.
Imagery is also going to be a really good one. You can connect these two kind of together. If you say, like, hey, man, imagine if, let's say you're down by 2 sets, right? Not 2 sets. Let's say down by 2 games. Like, imagine if I'm only down 2 games. Imagine if I come back, how the crowd's going to be looking for that one. Saying the word imagine, the same thing. If you tell someone don't imagine a yellow bus, they imagine a yellow bus.
Right.
So getting them to imagine something is really effective in the beginning of the game or the set, wherever the case may be, to kind of build those weeds in there. So imagery and getting them to imagine something that happened in the past. Imagine if every shot you hit was down the line painted. Like, how were you able to be able to hit that shot right there? The last one for focus comes from a book called The Inner Game of Tennis. You ever read that book before?
Yeah, of course.
Sweet. So if anyone hasn't read the book before, the whole premise on The Inner Game of Tennis is you have a self one and a self two. Essentially, you have your mind and you have your body. And the premise of that book is that during practice time, your mind is talking a lot to your body. It's conversations that it has. Your mind is telling your body, like, hey, make sure you have this form. Make sure you follow through with your forehand. Make sure you step in with this footwork. Your mind is talking your body through it to be able to build up muscle memory. So on game day, you shouldn't be thinking about how your form should be. Your body should have muscle memory. And the whole premise is that your mind trusts your body to be able to do what it's supposed to do. So on game day, you might just focus on the ball. You might just focus on the puck. You might focus on the back of the rim. You might focus on the wide receiver's hips. You might focus on the linebacker and what they're doing. That's where your mind is focused at, but you trust your body to be able to do everything else. The issue that athletes can run into when they don't trust themselves, and this can go into confidence, is when they start second guessing what their body's reactions are. Then their mind starts telling their body, hey, you should be doing this. If you play baseball and you're at bat, the ball's coming at you 90 miles an hour. Your brain should be focused on the ball and what it's doing and trusting your body to respond to it. But as that ball's coming to you 90 miles an hour, if your brain is like, hey, oh, how should my hand placement be? Maybe I should make sure I step in my foot this time. Now the ball's right in front of your face, and then you miss the ball. So if
Yeah.
you can get your opponent to be able to think about and interrupt that connection, interrupt that trust, very simply, all you have to do is get them to think about the fundamentals in a positive way, in a negative way. Like, yo, man, your forehand is crushing. How do you whip it up like that? Like, your arm just kind of goes over there. That's nuts. Anything you can do to get them to focus on how they do it, or their backhand is messing up or whatever, it can be something positive. Just get them to focus on how they're doing something. If their backspin is nasty, if their slice is nasty, like how do you get under the ball like that? Do you start up here? You start down there? Like, bro, I'm
Yeah.
just admiring right now. And then
Yeah.
they might think about like, man, I need to really get up higher. That's how my back, you know what I mean? And then they start missing it. Then that's all I need to do. So those are the different things I came up with for impacting someone's focus based on the premise of it being staying in the present. Let me know what your thoughts are, Nate, and which ones you think might be really good ones, which ones you think you might utilize, because you're down there in Miami playing all kinds of tournaments right now. Which ones do you think might be useful for you?
Um, I would say imagery because I talk
Mm,
a lot when I play. I say a lot of stuff. I act like I'm mumbling things just so that my opponent can hear it from the other side of the court.
yeah,
Just so I makes it sound like I don't want him to hear it, but I do want him to hear it. I say a lot of things like, dude, like, there's no way he wins another point. Like, there's something like
mm,
imagery, like what you said. Like, dude, everyone's gonna go crazy after I win this next game, or something like that. Just staying mentally strong to yourself, I would say, is like the main thing. Like, it's the most powerful way to really break down someone's focus is mainly just staying composed. No matter what, like they expect me to get upset after a bad call or a tough rally. But I just reset and play the next point, which is
yeah,
exactly, you know, what we talked about last episode. That like point already happened. Like next point, you know, you got this. But it can mess up their head. They realize that I'm not gonna crack, and it puts even more pressure on them. So I feel like that's the main thing. That's like the main strategy. um, Imagery is a good one. I actually do use that. That's a good way to put it. But tennis is like very emotional and mental. So if I notice my
mm,
opponent is getting frustrated after missing backhands, like I'll keep targeting that side. I'm not going to switch it around um, unless I feel like they're starting to really get to it. But if they
yeah,
complain about calls or get upset after long rallies, like I'll push them into those uncomfortable situations as much as possible because it's 90% a mental game. Because
mm,
everyone at this level is somewhat the same. So like once their emotions take over, their focus is gone, and then that's where like you have that in on them, where you can basically just crack and exploit all the emotional triggers. Another one that's like what you said kind of, but I would put it as in like changing the rhythm. But a better way to
mm,
put it is like momentum. So in a lot of other sports, it's used a lot, timeouts and everything like that.
yeah,
Something in tennis that I started doing when I was younger is like when someone's serving, I would like right before they serve, I would like tie my shoes, slower it
mm,
down. If there's a ball, if someone serves a first serve and they miss, I would like, go for the ball, take some time so that they overthink their second serve.
yeah,
Most of the time, it's a double fault. Like, especially in the juniors when I was younger, it would get to a lot of people's heads. And just something like just a controversial call, whether it's in or out, but the way that I would react to that call is like something that would get into their head and screw up the rhythm and the pace and the momentum. Taking more time on, let's say, a changeover. Let's say if I'm losing, if I'm down a break, take more time, just reset, just for them to start thinking and overthinking about it more, and for me to get more zoned in. Versus when I'm up, I like to speed things up,
Hmm.
and especially if I'm up and I'm on serve.
Yeah.
When you serve, it's kind of like if I'm ready, like you got to be ready, But
Hmm.
if they're serving, I also got to be ready. So it really just depends on where you are in the match, but like just applying consistent pressure when you're up. Um, that's the best way to break down someone's focus. Staying consistent and applying pressure. If they expect me to go for big winners, I'll change it up and play safe. I could do 10 spin back ends in a row, 1 point, and then like mix in a couple slices. You know, depending on playing on clay versus the hot weather.
Yeah.
Just be ready, because especially now that I'm in Miami, the weather, the humidity is way worse than it is in New York. So
Hmm.
just be ready to change as many shirts, as many changeovers, um, ice, water, towels, everything. Just there should be no excuses. Um, what else? The more
I like that.
frustrated and mentally like drained that the opponent becomes,
Hmm.
um, you know, just play safe, but also like aggressive, and then making them hit one extra shot every time. Like I said, the 3-shot rule. I mean, since I came here, I've just been trying to get as consistent as I can with the weather because I've been indoors recently. So
Hmm.
playing outside with the wind and the sun and all these things, mainly just coming 3 days before the tournament just to get like a feel of the ball, how it is outside. Um, I've been playing a couple of points, and the main strategy is just 3 shots in the court, 3 shots, 4 shots, just staying consistent because a lot of people miss before it even gets to 3 shots. That's the main thing. Applying pressure while also staying consistent. You got to know your balance of when you can hit the ball hard through the ball, but
Hmm.
also where you can make 50 of those balls in a row. You know what I mean? You have to find that
Yeah.
balance. And that's why coming here a couple of days before these tournaments are very essential to get used to it so that you do find that balance once you do get on the court. Because a lot of people, fly to these tournaments and spend all this money and can't adjust the weather in time or the circumstances. And then as soon as they get on the court, they get tight, they lose focus and then they get broken down.
And now you're talking some stuff from the art of war about knowing your terrain. So that's something I definitely talk into later on because you mentioned a couple of aspects that are fundamental to when you want to attack your opponent's focus. And I like how, and this is what I mean by every sport is different. Like, your sport. With tennis, you can be able to make changes. If they hit a first serve and it rolls into the court, but it's up by the net, it's not really a problem. But you want to slow the game down and say, hey, can someone go ahead and grab that ball real quick? Or, hey, if you're playing on clay, oh, this line's a little bit messed up. Can someone clean up that line real quick? Go ahead and clean this line real quick, whatever the case may be. So every sport has its intricacies. And I think as an athlete, writing it down as far as what are all the different things I can do to be able to slow the game down? What does that look like? What are all the different things I can do to be able to speed the game up? What does that look like? What are all the different things I can say to imagine X, Y, and Z? What does that look like? And having that in your repertoire the same way you would have a type of serve or the same way you have a type of forehand, having that and knowing that and when to use it. And then also another thing you mentioned too is getting to be able to understand your opponent. So tennis has warm-ups. You're going to warm up with your opponent a little bit and
Yeah.
use that to be able to understand what their frustration might be. If you hit like a if you on purpose hit some shots off to the left or hit some shots off to the right, which is considered not, proper etiquette. You really hit it down the middle, make it easy. If you
Yeah.
hit some shots here, hit some shots there, and judge what their focus is like and how frustrated they might be able to get to things, then you can be able to make a read of like, all right, maybe these strategies might be really good. And that should also be in your playbook. What are
Yeah.
some tests I should do for my opponent that's really simple, really easy, that they won't notice, just for me to get some information on them? Another fundamental thing we'll talk about too is that's why I mentioned in the podcast, being kind is really helpful. Because if you're kind and nice, that disguises some of the different things you do. It depends. It
Yeah.
depends. Me and Ben Kelly, is a Harvard D1 soccer player. He's like, it depends on the person. You got to. It depends on your sport. It depends on the person. Being kind might
Yeah,
be
of
really
course.
helpful, and sometimes being really focused might be really helpful. Being quiet might be really helpful, and it has to match your personality. I was talking to a soccer player, another soccer player from Stonehill, and she's really like, I don't say she's bubbly, but she's like, she gets really excited. So for her, she's naturally really excited during games, before games. She should still be really excited. And that might, for her, being nice and being happy and seeming nice and seeming happy, I should say, might be really beneficial. That matches her personality. So
Yeah.
everything is so different. So you gotta know yourself, know your opponent or whatever. But definitely having some tests that you would run just to see what your opponent might be like. And
Yeah.
if they know how to attack you too, they're gonna be fine. But like, so, and then also having a list of strategies that you might be able to utilize. All right, I want to go into self control. Self control is interesting. And last podcast we talked about self discipline. Like there's 3 levels of self discipline. Self
Yeah.
control is the first one. I can't remember the name of it, but I remember it now. Self control, self regulation, self discipline. This is a bit different because on the podcast, our first podcast, we're talking about the defensive strategies for being able to be self disciplined. When it comes to attacking strategies for self control and self regulation, they're slightly different, but it's not going to matter in this sense. Um, so, self control and self regulation is essentially your mind regulating its emotions to be able to not do something it wants to instantly do, but do something else that's better. For example, in a tennis realm, a ball is floating there. Like, I want to smack the crap out of this and just smack it down the line and hit paint lines and hit a winner. And then your brain comes in and it's like, yo, Nate, chill out. It's only the second ball. This is chill out. Hit the ball back cross court. It's still a really great shot. It's going to set you up nicely and it doesn't over risk anything. Like, relax. Someone
Okay.
hits a slice backhand. It's like, oh man, I'm going to smash this. It's relax. It's a slice backhand. We need more topspin on it. I can't just smack the crap out of it and hit into the net. That is self control. That's self regulation. You're regulating your emotions. And same way too, if it's hot and someone gets easily frustrated, like they should be able to better regulate than that. So if you hit the net, every time people don't know tennis, if you hit the ball, it hits the net, goes over, you're supposed to be like sorry and like do a little wave or whatever. If you don't say sorry on purpose, you see how the other person reacts, you see what their self regulation might be like. But self control, self regulation is just regulating your emotions. So knowing that as a foundation for self-reg, self-control, then you can come into the different strategies and how you want to be able to attack the self-reg or self-control. What's interesting about this one is that it's so different per sport. Actually, I missed something really crucial. Let me back up a bit. How self-control and self-regulation works when it comes to humans is very interesting. I'm going to use an analogy of a battery. So knowing that self-reg, self-control is how you manage your emotions, how you think about, instead of just doing what's the impulse is for you, think about how you should really react. People don't want to do that for so long. So everyone has a battery. Think about it that way. Everyone has a battery. Everyone's battery is the same size. You cannot train your battery to be a bigger size. That's what they found through the research. Everyone's battery is the same size. When your battery is full, you're able to regulate your emotions. You don't get frustrated easily. You make smart decisions. That's great. When your battery is depleted, then you start making bad decisions. It's like when you go home late at night and then you see cookies. You wouldn't eat those in the morning, but now it's nighttime. Your self-regulation has been depleted a bit. Now you're just snacking on cookies over there.
Yeah.
So when the battery is low, that's when the self-regulation goes out the window. How to be able to drain someone's battery is doing things that makes them regulate their emotions. It could be anything. Sitting up straight, you have to regulate your emotions. Not to eat cookies out of the cookie jar, you have to regulate your emotions. Talking about for tennis, for example, and this is what someone should be thinking about for their sport. What are things that I can do that make someone regulate their emotions? Hitting backspins makes someone regulate their emotions. They have to hit the ball a certain way to be able to counter that. So if you're hitting a certain serve a certain way, if you hit the ball into their body, they have to hit a certain way to be able to counter that. What makes them regulate their emotions? It's different for every sport. It would be hours going down a list for every sport, but something you should think about when I'm talking. And anyone else listening, there's something you should think about. So that's how the battery gets drained. Is the more self-regulation stuff you do, that drains the battery. The only way to fill back up the battery is doing stuff that doesn't require the self-regulation. So sleeping, just relaxing, chilling, that will fill your battery up. Another key thing to realize too is throughout the day, knowing that concept is like as you use self-reg, you drain your battery. If you have night matches or if you play things at night, typically someone's self-reg will be more drained because they just spent all day doing all kinds of stuff. Anything that requires regulation ends up draining their battery. So knowing that concept again of like self-reg is a battery, can't make it bigger, can only make it drain slower. So we talked about this in our first podcast. As you practice self-discipline, as you do things like working out, as you do things like training, as you do things like eating healthy and resisting certain things, that trains your self-regulation that actually makes your battery drain slower. You can't make it grow bigger, you can make it drain slower. So when it comes to attacking someone's self-regulation or self-control, first things you have to do, and I haven't really figured this out yet, but you have to test how good their self-reg might be / where it might be. I
Yeah.
haven't thought about how to test that yet. But for tennis, it should be good because you have warm-ups and you're one-on-one with the person. So you can do
Yeah.
things like I mentioned, is trying to get them to be frustrated. Not noticeably trying to get them to be frustrated, but trying to sneakily get them frustrated and see where's their regulation at right now. If it's
Yeah.
sunny outside and they're like, "Oh my god, so freaking hot." Oh, I was like, "Oh, okay, your regulation is not that great right now." So
Yeah.
therefore, based on your regulation, this is a slow burn thing. Knowing that the battery drains and knowing that a D1 athlete is going to have probably a good level of self-reg, because to be a D1 athlete, you have to regulate yourself a lot.
Yeah.
Knowing that, it's going to be a slow burn. So first is doing whatever tests you think would be able to judge what their self-reg is on right now. The second thing is what things you can do to be able to hurt their self-reg. What type of shots you need to be able to hit. For football, a good example is if we know football, you have a defensive end. Their job is to
Yeah.
contain, make sure the quarterback doesn't get out the pocket. What happens later on in the game is, what does a defensive end do? Instead of containing, they crash down, trying to make a play. Quarterback rolls out for a big gain. That's self-regulation. They lost their containment. So how you can be able to attack that is going to be really important. With all that being said, what ways do you think might be a good test for someone's self-reg as a tennis player, and what ways do you think you might actually attack someone's self-reg to be able to deplete it as the match goes on?
So some things that I usually do in the warm up, let's say, usually before the match even warms up, I already have like an established warm up. My body's already warmed. I'm sweating a little bit. I've hit a few balls, the morning before, depending on what time the tournament is. But I'm warmed up already. Like I'm starting, I'm loose. Something that I would do is change the pace of the shots in the warm up. So kind of see, like you said, where my opponent's like self regulation is and how like what their temper is at. Um, so let's say when they come to net and volley, kind of screw around with them and see like what their temper is like. Just do some little things where I purposely like give them a little like weaker overhead or something like that, where like to see how they take the warm up and how seriously they take the warm up. I've played a lot of people who like are already zoned in the warm up, and I've played a lot of people who literally are just feel uncomfortable. They're not loose enough, and they only start really warming up in the first 3 games, and those are the first couple of games where you have to really take advantage of them, because a lot of people just jump straight into the warm up without even breaking a sweat yet, and feeling loose. So those first couple of games of the set, which are very crucial, that's when they really start to warm up, and that's where a lot of people, screw up, because tennis is unpredictable and emotions can change fast. One bad call or a missed shot can throw you off, and self-regulation means that recognizing when frustration or anxiety is building and knowing how to calm yourself down. So like when I feel myself tense, take a deep breath, slow down, slow the point down, like we just talked about, the momentum of your opponent, and reset before the next point, because the next point already happened.
Mm-hmm.
Next point, move on. Um, Reminding yourself like to focus on what I can control, like my effort, moving my feet, keeping the ball in play, strategy, the 3-shot rule. Um, what else? Just in life, self-regulation is what helps me manage as just being a student athlete. And even in school, there are days where you could be tired or stressed, but you have to push through by sticking to your routine, because the second you ruin your routine, the next day is ruined, and that ruins the week, and then it starts being a routine of bad habits. So whether it's going to practice or finishing an assignment, or even like posting a picture for a company that you start working with, like it's not about being perfect, but it's about adjusting when things don't go as planned. So while still staying focused on what matters. And I think that's like the most important thing, because self-regulation keeps you steady when life gets, chaotic, even on the court or off the court. So on the
Yeah.
court, staying focused, you know, don't think about the point that just happened, but think about the point that's about to happen and reset. Just like in life, you studied for a test, things didn't go your way. It's not the end of the world. Like you look at the test you took in high school and the one that you got upset about that you didn't do well, and right now you're a freshman in college and you're like, there was no reason for me to be, you know, crying about that test.
Right.
Um, but it's about learning how to respond to things in a healthy, productive way. So in tennis, it can be different between staying in a match mentally versus checking out after a tough set. And in life, it just helps you adapt, stay productive, keep moving forward your goals, no matter
Yeah.
what the obstacles are.
Yeah, and that's actually gave me two ideas as well. One is 'cause it's something you mentioned in the first podcast too, is something you're mentioning now is outside life stuff, especially as a collegiate athlete, that can impact your ability to have confidence, your ability to be able to focus.
Yeah.
As we talked about, and again, that's why understanding step two of like what is the fundamental aspects of self control and self regulation. It's a battery. If you know that your opponent, you mentioned this, sometimes you know your opponent has other stuff going on in life and you can see it's impacting them in some way, shape, or form, that probably means their self reg is not, their battery is not as high as it could be. If you're talking before the match, you're talking before the warm ups, and you mention like finals or you mentioned school, and they mention something about like, hey, this is being a drag or it's a lot or whatever the case may be. At that point, you could be gathering information. That could be one of your testings that you do is how do you gather information about your opponent? If you have some time, ask them questions about life. If you see like, oh, it sounds like life is a lot for them, maybe self-control slash self-reg is something I want to attack in this case. It's just information gathering. And then you can do some other tests too, is like their frustration's high or whatever. All right, unless they're really playing me right now and they're really good at it, their self-reg is a little off. So I'm gonna attack this. And then we didn't talk about anger, but knowing the strategies for anger is like I'm gonna try to make them angry. I'm trying to make them frustrated. That can also even deplete the self reg even more and make things really spiral. So that's why I'm talking about like having tests and writing things down and just
Yeah.
having some strategies the same way you have strategies for offense, the same way you have strategies for defense, you should have strategies for attacking the mind. And while you're down there in Miami, testing them out. What works, what doesn't work. Like
Yeah.
that works great, that sucks, that works awesome. That's all right. So when you go back to school and you're playing matches for your school, then you kind of have them fine tuned a little bit. The same way you're fine tuning getting three shots and you're fine tuning your mental game and the aspects of the mental game. The second one too I thought about for tennis actually might be interesting is even just if you're hitting shots loopy. People that don't play tennis, don't know what it means. But if you're hitting like shots really deep, having a lot of arc on them, and then making your opponent back up. And if
Yeah.
your opponent, if you're self-regulated, you would hit your shot and get back to probably the baseline and back into a great neutral defensive positioning on the court. If they
Hmm.
start to lose self-reg, what happens? And they stay 3, 4, 5 feet behind the baseline, then you can hit a drop shot. And then that might be more effective. Like they might miss that drop shot. But that might be a way to test of, in set one, they would always get back to the baseline. But now in set two, they're hanging back there a little bit. So now you might be able to take advantage of that. Like, everyone hates loopy shots or whatever, but the case may be. So there's different ways for different sports, and each sport is so different. And I think that's what's fascinating about it. Because like, oh, I'm sure someone's listening. They're like, oh, for my sport, I could be doing X, Y, and Z. If you're a wrestler, you're right next to them the entire time. Hell, you can whisper in their ear while you're on the mat with them. You do a
Yeah.
whole bunch of different things. I mean, Khabib and McGregor and UFC, like he's talking to each other, like directly. So fascinating. All right, the next thing I want to talk about is the foundational aspects for attacking someone's mental game based on these two books that I have in front of me. There's rules and whatnot. If anyone's ever read the 48 Laws of Power, there's 48 Laws of Power, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I didn't every law of power does not connect with when it comes to attacking the mental game of sports. Some just don't connect well. But there's probably about, I think, 20 laws that connect pretty well with mental aspects of sports. I'm not going to go over all 20, that's too many. I'll highlight some. The first critical, this is just knowing this before you, actually, two things. Let me back up. before anyone should attack someone's mental game, you mentioned this already, you have to have a solid defense. If you make someone lose their self-regulation, actually, and you don't have good self-regulation, you're too busy focusing on their self-regulation, now you're not self-regulated. If you're trying to mess with their focus of like, yo, man, imagine how you hit that backhand, and you start imagining how they hit the backhand, congratulations. Like, now
Yeah.
you're both worse. If you try to make people angry and they say something they don't know, let's say you call out, you yell out every single time, a shot goes well. You're not really like that, but you do that because you see that pisses them off. And then they start getting pissed off. And then next thing you know, instead of hitting the ball back to you nicely, they smack it across the court, and you get pissed off. Congratulations. Now you're both angry. Now you're both narrow-minded. Now you both are frustrated. Now you both make mistakes. So before anyone ever uses an attack, you got to understand the defense. So a lot of the podcasts talk about the defensive side of things. Know your defense first before you attack. All right. One of the big things that when it comes to it, and again, I'll go over one at a time, and you can kind of let me know what your thoughts are on it. One of the big things is concealing your intentions. So if you have certain strategies in mind, if you have certain tests in mind, don't brag about your strategies. Don't share your strategies. Even after the match, if you just demolish, if you get a double bagel, 6-0, 6-0, don't brag about, man, I messed up your focus so bad with this X, Y, and Z. Don't do that, because one, you don't want people knowing that you're using strategies.
Of course.
And another thing about being kind and nice is if you beat them and you're pleasant about it, they might share that with other players. Like, yo, Nate, like, really, like, got me X, Y, and Z. I don't know how he did it, but I played my worst game ever.
Yeah.
Great. It's ambiguous. So concealing your emotions, concealing your intentions is going to be a really critical one. What do you think about that law?
I think the examples that you gave, I think they're really good. Just talking about how not basically telling your opponent what you did to break them down, essentially, because in the junior circuit, everyone talks. Like by now,
Yeah.
everyone in the East knows what everyone's good at and what everyone does to trigger people. That's just how it is, and that's how it always will be. But everyone has their own things that they do to trigger other people. Um, and one of the best ways to conceal I would say your strategy is by mixing up your shots. So that's just in general speaking, not for one of your opponents, but like if I hit a cross court forehand or I always go for big serves down the tee, my opponent will figure it out, soon enough.
Right.
But if I try to switch up where I hit sometimes hitting flat and then I hit spin, or if I serve out wide and then on my first serve I do a second serve kick, it throws my opponent off because they're already standing so far back because they think that I'm going to serve 120 miles an hour down the tee. But since they're already so far back, I take advantage and I, serve a kick, come to the net, volley, put away, set it up for an overhead, or I already win the point with the volley. So just trying to switch it up where they're always reacting instead of attacking. I think that's the best way to put it. So that they're always on their toes, a variety in shot selection, and I make sure that my body language is the most important thing, and positioning doesn't give away my next move. So um, I would say beginning of this year, my toss on my serve. So when you're serving the ball out wide, you kind of start to toss it a little bit. For a righty, you toss it a little bit to the right so that you can get that slice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then on the kick, you kind of toss it above you so you can get that chip.
Yeah.
So finding the balance where you toss it perfectly, exactly right over here, where you can do this, and then you can serve down the tee and you can kick, is what I've been doing this year. And I feel like
Yeah.
it's helped me a lot because a lot of people that I've played, you can tell by when someone tosses and they toss the ball like this, there's no way that they're going this way. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Like you're kicking it.
As they're even throwing the ball up, I'm already standing right here and I'm waiting
Mm-hmm.
for it. So that's the biggest thing for me. And a lot of mentally, someone misses the first serve, I would come up to literally in the middle of the court on the outside or do side, and I would stand like right in front of the box, and I would screw with them. And the second they throw the ball up, I'd move back, but they still think that I'm right there, and they're like,
Yeah.
"Nah, screw this guy," and they serve a bomb second serve, hits like the back fence, and I win the point. But just by getting into
Hmm.
someone's head like that, um, something that I do also is if I would, let's say on the first serve, I would stand literally all the way to the right and
Mm.
leave that down the tee open. And then the second they toss the ball up, 75% of the chance they're going to go for the open spot,
Right.
and I'm already going to be there prepared. So it's everything is like it's mental. It's everyone at this level is pretty much the same. It's just
Yep.
you have to. There's so many strategies. There's so many
Yeah.
things, little things that you can do. You know, moving your feet a little more. That's the biggest thing. But positioning on your return, positioning on your serve, getting the angles right. So if you're in the middle of the court, obviously hitting the ball, you know, kind of like in a V gives you the best angles. But if you're on the right side of the court, hitting the ball down the line, that's the highest point of the net,
Right.
right? But when you hit the ball cross court, you have a lower angle of the net. The net's a little bit lower. You can hit the ball harder,
Right.
right? In singles, you have a single stick. I don't know. I think you know what that is. There's a
Yeah. Yeah.
single stick, and then there's the doubles. So the single stick lifts the net up higher by the when you hit the ball down the line.
Yep.
So as it goes down like this, when you hit the ball cross court, you know it's a lower angle. The net is essentially lower. So that's
Right.
like you have to think about smarter percentage shots and pattern breakers, like changing what I do when my opponent starts expecting the same shot.
Right.
So if I've been playing long, consistent rallies, I might suddenly, you know, hit a drop shot or charge the net. And like the main goal is just disrupt the rhythm while keeping them guessing. That's the
Right.
best way to put it.
Right. And when you time it too, because I mean, you're not gonna do that on a critical point, but you might do it somewhat different. I think in making that analogy of everything you just said about, for example, your toss, making your toss the same so they don't know where you're hitting at. The analogy for the mental game is your behavior, demeanor should be the same. If you are bubbly, be bubbly the whole way. If
Hmm.
you're like, I can't be bubbly, I'm intense, be intense the entire way. Keep the same
Or
demeanor. You have to have a straight face, but the same demeanor is the same way, should be the whole way. So that way they don't know when you're tricking them this way or tricking them that way or using this strategy, using that strategy. They can't tell what a case may be. And like the really blonde, really bland kid with no affect is like, "Hey man, nice serve." Like I don't know
yeah,
what that was.
the second your
Yeah.
yeah, the second your initial demeanor changes, that's when like your opponent knows to crack you. You know, if you
Right.
come in with a very good mood. I've played a lot of people that came in like, yeah, like I've had a good day, whatever, all this, you know, lose the first game, like, you know, toss their racket a little bit, bad mood, start serving, yeah, it's done, you know.
Yeah.
But if you keep that same initial, you know, how your body language throughout the whole match, that's just the key.
And I think there's one thing I want to mention too, because as we're talking about this, and if your opponents end up, I'm gonna skip ahead a little bit. In the art of war, one thing you mentioned before, and one thing I'll add in too, is knowing your terrain. You're in Miami; it's humid as all hell outside, so you want to be able to practice as much as you can in those elements. In football, as you get later into the season, for example, the Miami Dolphins, the thing is like you're in Miami. The Miami Dolphins can't play in the cold because it's so hot all the time. So when they get up in the cold
Yeah,
weather, they slow down, they can't do what they need to do, and so they've lost in Buffalo for I don't know how many times because they can't play in the cold. Tua's like 0-6 in cold weather, whatever the case may be.
yeah,
So knowing your terrain knows how you can be able to prepare for that terrain. So know where you're going into and prepare appropriately. You're down there early so you can get adjusted to things. That's how it should be. So that's one key strategy someone should be utilizing. And then also social media is another one. If you have an opponent coming up, you can find out what their demeanor might be like if you do a quick little Google search about them. Now, the
so
caveat being, if they do one about you, they're gonna see you're on 2 podcasts talking about the mental game, so they're gonna
yeah,
like take time to listen to it. And so that leads me into another law of the opposite of concealing your intentions is if you're found out. If someone's like, "Yo, Nate, I love that you're on that podcast." Your next opponent's like, "Hey, Nate, man, that was a nice podcast you did." You're like, "All right, they know that I know." ways to be able to attack my opponent. You
Yep.
know, if it ever comes to maybe like you make a slip up and they know that you're attacking their mindset, once you're found out, you just own it. Don't brag about it, but
Of
just
course.
own it and be like, oh yeah, there's so many different ways to be able to attack you. Don't two things. Own it. Don't brag about it. Still don't share your strategies, but talk about the outcomes. Like, yeah, there's so many strategies to be able to get someone to be able to hit the ball long. So many strategies to be able to get someone to hit the ball into the net. Like, yeah, there's really good ones, man. Like if we have more time, I'll talk about it with you, but there's all these different things to talk about the outcomes. What that does is then for your opponent, it still works because now they're like, is Nate using something against me right now? Or is he not using something against me
It
right now?
gets
Is
them
he
overthinking, yeah.
yeah, is he messing with me? Which can actually be more comfortable because then you don't have to mess with them at all. You're like, I can just completely focus on what I got to do. I don't got to worry about their mental game because the fact that they know I know something screws them up already. So if someone
Mhm.
does find out, that's how you can still be able to use it to your advantage. So I said something earlier about having a friendly demeanor, and you gave a face like you didn't trust it. Having a friendly demeanor, or you had second thoughts about it. What are your thoughts about it?
Having a friend, like, I don't know about having a friendly demeanor. I feel like being way too friendly isn't good, but there are
Mm-hmm.
also, that's just me. There are a lot of people who are very friendly. I have a good friend who plays for Northern Arizona, and we went to Cornell and we played a tournament there, and he played one of these kids, and everyone goes on the court with like a banana, like a granola bar, or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and he won the first game. And on the changeover, they're still standing, and he starts eating a banana, and he looks at him, and everyone's watching. There's like a big crowd, and he's like, "You want to bite?" He's like kind of screwing with this kid, but he's being nice,
Mm-hmm.
being like
Mm-hmm.
way too nice, where he knows it's sarcastic in
Yeah,
that
yeah.
sense. So like for me, like I can't do that because that's just like when I'm like locked in, I don't really even talk.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'll get loud, I'll get aggressive, like in the point. But I don't really, we switch sides. I don't really talk, nothing like that. Um, I feel like it shows that I'm like very locked in. Because being too
Yeah.
nice, I feel like it can have like its pros and cons. But um, yeah, I feel like being too nice is just it's not for me. But it's worked for a lot of people, and
Mm-hmm.
anyone that's listening, it can definitely work for you. But you got to just try these things out because there are a lot of things that can work for you that you haven't tried out yet. And that's like something that a lot of people need to do. There are a lot of things that aren't satisfied with the way that they're playing right now or the way that they act in the court. And there's nothing wrong with, going one weekend and trying something different. Being very nice in one tournament and just having like a different kind of energy. Um,
Yeah.
for me, when I was younger, I never really got loud. I was
Mm-hmm.
always the quietest kid in the court. But that never changed. Whether I won a point, I wouldn't even say "come on." I just wouldn't say a word. I never got mad. I was just like very like I was just chilled out. Um, so a lot of people looked at it as in a very good way and a very bad way
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of times I'm on the court and it just looks like I'm just very like chilled out. But in my
Mm-hmm.
head, I'm doing A, B, and C, thinking about the point before and this.
Yeah.
But now, um, I'm very like energetic. I feel like that's a
Mm-hmm.
big thing when you get to college because it's always loud. You have like, you're on a team
Yep.
versus on the junior circuit you're on your own. So I
Mm-hmm.
feel like that's a big thing, and that's very crucial. And I feel like a lot of people don't get that until they get to the collegiate level, and a lot of people don't get to the collegiate level.
Right.
So being able to have that at the junior level, which a lot of people do, that's a very big advantage because it gets in a lot of people's heads. So like
Mm-hmm.
screaming "come on" or something like that, it screwed with me a couple of times, and I know
Mm-hmm.
for a fact that I've screwed with a lot of other people doing that a lot of times. So that's a very big thing. Just being very energetic and just staying exactly how you are the whole match, no matter what. If you
Yeah.
lose the point, still be energetic. You lose the point, next point, the guy's dribbling the ball, like, come on, let's go. One more, let's go.
Mm-hmm.
Something like that. just like get yourself pumping. Even if you're thinking in your head, like, dude, I'm playing really bad today. That guy doesn't know that you're thinking that. You want him to
Right.
think that you're about to win this point and there's nothing he can do about it.
Right. You're hyped up. Yeah, I think that's see now to see now to do more thinking. So I like having podcasts. 'Cause I've thought so much about the feeling demeanor and the benefits it brings. But if someone is chill, like what benefits does that bring? Obviously, I think the main benefit is someone can't tell what you're thinking. They think you're always chill. Like there's nothing messes with this guy. But if someone is angry, but that's their demeanor, like you have what's the dude's name? British dude, British tennis player. He just retired.
Andy Murray.
Thank you, Andy Murray. Dude's
Yeah.
pissed off all the time, right? He's a really good tennis player. Gets pissed off all the time versus like a Gil Monfils who's super chill and like
A
loves
lot
running
of
around
people
hitting.
need that though. A lot of people need to get pissed off just once. Um, there are a lot of people. I mean, Nick Kyrgios is a pretty bad example, I would say, but
Yeah,
um, there was a match a couple of weeks ago where Carlos Alcaraz actually broke a racket, and that's like a
really.
first.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was like a first. He said that was like the worst he's played. But aside from that, a lot of people need to like just get their anger out once, but then like that has to be it. It can't be like a
Mm,
multiple thing after every point that you lose. Some people like they lose a set, they go to the bathroom, and they literally like slap themselves in the face a couple of times. But you can't do that where your opponent sees that they're getting to you. A lot of people screw that up. A lot of people are sitting on the bench and between changeovers and like smacking their racket on the ground, like, and their opponent
mm,
sees that, and their opponent's thinking like, dude, I'm in his head, like this kid's done for.
right.
Like the second set right now, it's gonna be easy. You
Yeah.
know, you
I'm
can't
gonna
have,
drive that anger. I'm gonna drive this. I'm gonna do annoying things. I'm gonna like knock the bottle over by accident. I'm gonna piss him off even more.
of
And I
course,
think that people should like your personality has to match your personality. Again, if you're bubbly, then the happy demeanor can work really well for you. I was talking to another tennis player. His name is Anch, and he screams after every point. He just says, "Come on," or he says, "Let's go," because for him, in his mindset, he's like, "I use that to let go of whatever emotion I have. That is my way of releasing emotion. I don't care about the other person, but that's my way of releasing the emotion, and then I can get focused." So for him, that works really well. So ultimately it's the defensive aspect of things of you have to be able to get yourself back in focus. That's why the pre-performance routine is really important. That's his pre-performance routine. He lets out whatever emotion he's feeling, takes some deep breaths, bounce the ball, I think he said like 4 or 5 times, and then he's back into it. That's his routine. But someone has to figure out what matches your personality. Because if your personality is really chill, and then you start acting angry just cause and it doesn't match, it's off vibes. If you have a personality of like you like every single challenge, so everything excites you. When you miss the ball, you smile about it, but that's just your conniving way of like, yeah, bring it on. I love this. Then your personality has to match that. So I think it's definitely something I'm gonna do think about is different personalities people have and how they can be able to use that to their advantage on the court. All right, moving on. Oh, you mentioned something about like always changing things up so they don't really know what's
yep,
coming. I think on the mental game, the mental side of things is using false attacks so they don't really know what's coming. So for example, if you're like your friend who was like really happy, like want to buy the banana, like that's just a
yeah,
change up of like, what is this? Is he being for real? Is he being like
yep,
ridiculous? So what is going on here? They think about that for the next game and that messes up that next game. Nice. So changing things up in the mental game, if you're super chill, act act angry. Like this gets more complex. If you're chill, then you act mad. So you bait them into hitting hard shots or bait them into playing a certain way because they think you're upset, and that helps you. There's so many different ways to be able to do it. And the last thing I talked about too is knowing your opponent. If you know you're playing a ranked person, you know they're playing a really, really difficult tennis player, like they have better skills than you. Their forehand's better, their backhand's better, their serve is harder, their serve has way more spin. You are outclassed as far as technical things go. There's nothing you can do about it. It is what it is. So if you know that, then you're like, all right, I'm gonna have to rely more on mental strategies to try to be able to break their mental game. Or on the flip side, if you know you just have better technique, not technique, but just better skills than this player, you don't need to dive into the mental game. Like there's no point. Just crush them the way it may
Yeah.
be. So knowing the lay of your land, knowing your opponent, knowing your settings, knowing the weather, knowing the conditioning, knowing the wind, and being prepared for all those things in your training is going to be able to help you when the mental game comes for your
I
actual
kind
game.
of disagree with the fact that even
Mm,
though you know that you are statistically going to win a match,
mm,
that you clear out the mental aspect.
mm,
I disagree with that completely because I feel like mentally, um, just like just because on paper they're ranked higher you or whatever it is, um, they can be mentally screwing you. So if you're not
mm,
mentally in check,
mm,
they're going to mentally screw you. So changing up the mental game, beating a better opponent, like when you know you're playing someone better, whether it's in tennis or any competitive environment, you have to approach the match mentally, not just physically. Like
right.
breaking their mental game comes to changing up, staying unpredictable.
Mm,
Um, I would say stay calm and act like you belong. Like act like you are meant to have this be a competitive match. So when you're playing someone better, the first mental battle is, of course, within yourself, because you look at the draw, you're like, dude, this guy's like top 5 seed.
right.
Um, if you get into the match thinking that you're unbeatable, um, you are like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that part. I'm
If you
talking
go up to
about.
the match thinking that this guy's going to beat you, you've already lost. I tell
Oh yeah.
myself
Yeah. Yeah.
they might be better than you on paper, but today's about how I play and how smart I can be. If you carry
Mm,
yourself confidently, if you walk in confidently, this guy's like, dude, this guy thinks he can beat me right now. And then it makes them think, like, what makes them think that they can even beat me? Like, no
yeah.
slouching, no negative body language. Then they'll see that, like, you aren't intimidated by them. And then that low key intimidates them because they're like, dude, I should be killing this guy. Why does this guy think that he can even compete with
You
me?
could be. Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
definitely agree with that part. Like I think like attack and defense. Like defensively should come in the same way every single time. But if someone I'm thinking about more from an attack standpoint. Like if you decide to choose like I'm gonna attack their mental game, do you feel like if you know there's a skill gap, right? Defensively you come in the same way every time. You come with the same level of confidence, the same level of focus. Like you don't slouch, like you're not slouching at all on the defensive side of things. But to use the strategies for attacking the mental game takes extra focus, takes extra effort, takes extra mental capacity to be able to use those things. So if you feel like someone is weaker than you, well, not really feel. If you objectively know, like I'm stronger than this individual, do you feel like it'd be more better because the overall goal was to win. That's the overall goal. Get the dub. Do you feel like if you know your opponent is weaker than you, just objectively, do you feel like you should use less attacking mental strategies? Do you feel like you should use the same amount of attacking mental strategies, or how do you feel about that? Because that's what I was thinking at.
I feel like you shouldn't change what you do no matter who you play. So,
Mm,
um, the biggest mistake, and I've learned that the hard way, when you're
mm,
playing someone essentially that's weaker than you, the biggest mistake that you can make is relax and take it easy. Because in tennis, 1 point switches the whole match. That's when you lose
mm,
focus, start making careless mistakes, not moving your feet. Um, you give them confidence that they shouldn't have essentially. So the moment that they sense that you're not locked in, they'll play more freely, they'll take more risks, which also can put you in a bad position like pretty quick because like I said, 1 point changes everything. So
yeah,
you don't have
yeah,
to use extreme mental tactics,
right.
like constant emotional pressure or deception, but you still need to be mentally engaged to the point where
Oh
like
yeah.
focusing on playing smart, making high percentage shots, stay consistent. Something that I do that I forgot to add before is obviously you have the scoreboards. So on
Mm-hmm.
every changeover, usually the scoreboard is right by where you sit. It's like right between the benches. So
Mm-hmm.
usually if I'm winning, I'll change the scoreboard and I'll be like, yo, is this the correct score? Or I'll be like,
Mm,
or I'll make him look at it. Or sometimes I won't even touch it if I'm winning and I'll make him change the score so that he looks at the score and is like, yo, this guy's kicking my ass. You know what I mean?
yeah. Yeah.
Something like
I like
that.
that
So
line.
he gets reminded of the score, and then every time he's serving, you're usually supposed to say the score, but if you're losing, a lot of people don't even want to say it out loud. So I
Hmm.
would ask him, be like, "Yo, what's the score? What's the score?" Something like that, and it gets into their head.
Yeah.
So I still would do that no matter what. I wouldn't change
Yeah. Yeah.
how I play because then it becomes a habit of like, why do I even need to do this if I'm beating people? So um, the way that I mentally approach things, I wouldn't change a thing.
Mm. All right. I see that now. Yeah, I get your point because if you're not on the attack, like usually, let's say you're usually on the attack, right? If you're
Yeah,
not, then you're leading way for their confidence to build. If you usually, let's say you're like, I like the strategies for attacking their confidence. I usually attack them on a regular basis, and then you don't do that. You're like, I'm just going to focus on my game. I'm just going to focus on like mentally staying defensive. Still attacking, not playing defensive, attacking, but mentally staying defensive, just focusing on your own. And if you're not attacking their confidence, like you mentioned, something can change. And if their confidence builds to a whole nother level, now they're in flow, now they're playing great, and they end up beating
yeah.
you because you decided not to attack their confidence that time because you're like, you know what, I don't need to because I'm stronger, just objectively. So okay, touche, touche.
Someone like Roger Federer, who's my goat, of course, but someone like him, no matter who he's playing in the draw, if you watch the match, he doesn't play any different.
Yeah,
So watching tennis and it's basically kind of like watching film, like watching your favorite players, kind of doing what they do, essentially trying to at least. Um, if Roger Federer is playing someone who isn't as good as he is, the same exact way as he would be playing against Rafael Nadal, what makes me think that I shouldn't be playing against someone who's, you know, a UTR lower than mine. If Roger Federer is doing that, it doesn't make me any better, any more special for me not to do that. You know what I mean?
mm,
If Roger Federer is doing the same exact thing versus someone who he would kill versus when he's playing Rafael Nadal doesn't make me special where I shouldn't be doing that. Because Roger Federer is like he plays perfect. Like everything he does
yeah.
like is perfect. So if he does something, I should be modeling it. I should be doing the same thing.
See, now I have to exit. Now I have to cross this part out.
No, you're good.
No, I have to cross it out. No, you make a really good point. And I think because that comes from the art of war, which makes sense in the art of war, and sport is war
I
in a
mean,
sense.
it's different though. I mean, it's good that like we're talking about this because
Yeah,
there's you did a research on this and everyone has their own things, but essentially in different sports, it's different. So obviously in the art of war, it's it's kind of different versus in tennis. So
yeah,
having talked about that, now you have the perspective of someone who plays tennis
yeah,
and the mental tactics that they use. So I feel like that's it's good.
yeah. And it's different because, like, just thinking about it, like tennis is one, and football is a different thing. Like Philadelphia Eagles, you have Saquon Barkley. Like it's 3rd and 2. You can throw it if you want, or if your line is as good as their line, punch them in the face. So
Yeah.
yeah, you're right. I think it is good. Again, it goes back to the whole thing. Like every sport is different, so
Hmm.
it really depends. Like, but then like sometimes if you're on 3rd and 2, you want to do like a different type of play. You might want to do a trick play, just to, like throw them off the game, so you don't think they're gonna run every time on 3rd and 2. It's
You might
so
want to
different.
do
So
the
it's really fascinating.
backwards hurdle from Saquon. That was
Yeah,
the
might want to do the
that was
backwards hurdle. You might want to like I don't know, do a lateral, pull some like Josh Allen move. Oh, I had an idea for you. What if when you change the points over, right? You do it incorrect. Like let's say you're down like I don't know. Yeah, let's say you're down like I guess it wouldn't really work. You want to switch on odds, but like let's say you're down a bit, right? And then when you
yeah.
flip it, you flip an extra game for yourself, and they're like,
Honestly, I'm not gonna lie. It's worked. It's worked a couple of times. It's worked a couple of times. Another thing, forgot to add. Basically, what we were talking about. Let's say it's 15 all, and the
mm,
other guy's serving, and he doesn't. I've noticed a pattern where he doesn't call the score out because he's not confident enough to say the score out loud. You know what I mean?
Mm,
So 15 all, let's say I win the point, 15-30, but I don't go to the ad side and I stay in the do side, and he starts
mm.
serving. A lot of times, a lot of people aren't paying attention to the score, and it works. It does work. There's a lot
I
of
wasn't
people
talking about manipulating scores. I
there's
was talking about that's
a
funny.
lot of people that do it, and even if it doesn't work, right, it gets the guy
Yeah,
thinking like, how many times has he even tried this? How many times has it worked? So
yeah.
a lot of
Mm.
times it works for a lot of other people, but for me, I'm thinking about every single point and every single, you know, score, and I think about the point before a lot. So for me, it'll never work, like on me, but a lot of people don't pay attention to the score and they start rushing into points. So a lot of
Mm.
people don't even realize that. And when they do start to realize that, they think like, how many times has this happened to me already? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And then it
yeah.
screws with
That's an
their head.
interesting one.
And they're not even thinking about the point before. They're thinking about how many times they got screwed over. And then the next point, they do what they did the point before that they messed up on. So it's all like,
Yeah, I'm never playing Monopoly with you. If I'm ever playing Monopoly with you, Nate, you're not anywhere close to the bank. You're the type that started stealing 500s out the bank. So, but my thought process was not cheating the score system, but my thought process was they know you did it, and you're saying like, "Oh, my bad. I was just imagining when I am up 5-4 on you. Let me flip it back. Sorry."
I
So to get
mean,
them to imagine that, but your
I,
way works too. They actually get concrete points. Your way would be better.
I mean, I wouldn't say if it doesn't work, it's like, all right, it'll just be that score the
Yeah,
next,
yeah.
something like that. Like a
Right,
lot of
yeah.
these little like mimics and stuff like that. The 15-0, like the guy serves, you win the point at 15-30, stay in the do side. He's like, bro, it's 15-30. And I was like, all right, my fault. Like it'll be 15-40 in a second, something like that.
Yeah.
And then he's like, dude, like what? And then he double faults because he's
Yeah. Like
thinking
I was just
about
thinking
how much
ahead.
pocket.
Exactly.
And then
See, now we're on the same wavelength.
yeah,
I was using the imagination
you can
aspect
edit
of
the other, you
being
can
able
edit
to
the other one
attack.
out. You can edit the other one out.
I'm not editing the other one out. And everyone knows it's like Nate's gonna try to trick me. Which again,
Everyone
it's
knows.
so
Everyone knows.
everyone knows.
Yeah, everyone
All right,
does.
cool. Yeah, I mean, but I think that's cool because either way, it's like I think with the mental game stuff, as long as you have this mindset of I'm gonna do it and then like forget about it. Like
Yeah.
you're not like, oh, I'm staying on this side. I wonder if it bothered. I wonder if it bothered. I wonder like I did it. If it worked, great. Like if they
Hmm.
notice it, cool. If they didn't, I don't care. Like it was just
It's your
like
fault. You're the one
yeah,
serving. How are you not noticing the
yeah.
score?
I threw a little pebble. If you play around the pebble a bit, I don't care. Once I throw the pebble, it doesn't matter to me because there's a
Yep.
bunch of more pebbles I got in my back pocket I'm going to be throwing.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I like that analogy actually. It's about throwing pebbles. It's all about throwing pebbles at people's
Yep.
glass houses. Dope. All right, that's all I had. See, that's why I only picked two topics. I'd write like an hour and some change.